Margaret Ben, and this is August 22nd, 2012. And I'm the home of Judge Barbara and Norma Haynes and Senator Joe Haynes in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. Good afternoon, Judge Haynes. Thank you so much for being a part of this process today.
Good morning or good afternoon, Margaret. I'm Barbara Haynes, former judge of the Third Circuit Court. I was born September the 6th, 1937. I'm married to Joe Haynes, who's wonderful. I have 3 wonderful children and 7 grand children, and I mean grand.
Well, you were born in Nashville, Tennessee.
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I've lived here all of my life except when I went away to college.
Tell me a little bit about growing up in Nashville, the area of town, your parents. Just set the scene, siblings. Tell me about your early years.
You know, I think that we were probably not very prosperous, but we didn't know that. And I lived down the street from St. Cecilia Academy. And I played with the nuns every day. We played hide and seek in the cemetery. I helped them with the gardening. I went to Jones Elementary, and I had 2 cousins there, and I made Red Bird, and they didn't. And they didn't understand it, and I didn't either, and we all cried. But I had an interesting childhood because North Nashville had been abandoned by the Worthens and everybody, and the plant was still active. But those people had moved to Belmead and Summer Homes, and so North Nashville was going under a transition. But I had wonderful teachers.
Tell us about your mom and dad.
Mom and Dad were, well, you can imagine, having me was a shock. I wasn't anything like what they thought I would be, and certainly not my mother. But they were...
What do you mean by that?
Oh, my mother, I'll give you an example. See this dress up here? When Mother and I went to buy my first formal, she picked one that had ruffles, just layer after layer. And I didn't realize how I looked. And when I got to the prom, everybody wanted to dance with me. So I go to the locker room with the girls to go to the bathroom, and I said, I don't know what this is. All these men are asking me to dance. And they said, turn sideways. Well, those ruffles stuck out to here, But Mama was very finicky. She didn't believe in going to town without gloves and a hat and, all that stuff. And Daddy was with the newspaper. So as we got older, my brothers and I carried every route in this town. I paid for Joe's law license, selling newspapers at the Jehovah's Witnesses convention for 3 days because they wouldn't let men in there to sell. Daddy was a shrewd business person. And he and my uncle bought and sold rental property in addition to both working for the newspaper. So I was the first girl, this is my real claim to fame, I was the first girl in Nashville that could drive, roll, and throw newspapers at the same time. And I thought I was hot stuff. But when it snowed or rained, we knew which ones would call. And Daddy'd say, okay, hit it. And the 3 of us would roll out of bed and get in an old beat-up jalopy and deliver the papers. One time when they went on strike, my daddy took us down there, and my brothers and I, and we were young teenagers, helped package and mail and load the trucks to deliver. And then as Daddy got older and got sick, we could collect every route, or we collected all the newspaper racks downtown.
Where did you deliver? Was that in North Nashville?
Well, no. Daddy was one of the circulation chairmen, so it didn't matter where anybody lived. We had to know, and we had this one little old lady, Mrs. Simons. And if it rained or snowed, she would call the newspaper and say we missed her. Well, what the truth was, she didn't want to walk in the wet or the snow, and we'd have to go hand her paper. Miss Simmons, here's your paper.
You mentioned your brothers.
I have 2 brothers. They were a source of pride, but yet they were constantly telling my daddy, don't let her do that. Don't let her do that. Like the first time Joe came home from UT and visited our house, a bunch of guys that I were pals with, I had a lot of Valentine candy boxes. And Joe just lifted the lid and started to get a piece of candy. And my brother said, "Did you send her any of those boxes?" And Joe said, "Well, no." And he said, "Then keep your cotton-picking hands out of it." I had a date with this guy that everybody wanted to date. I was a lifeguard, and he was a lifeguard. And he came to pick me up to go to Town, and he had on blue jeans. And my brothers went in and told my daddy, nobody goes to Town on Sunday night in blue jeans. And so my daddy comes out and said, "She can't go with you in blue jeans." And the guy said, "Oh, it's okay, I'll go home and change." And I thought, "You wuss, this is the last time I'll go out with you. You let my daddy and my brothers intimidate me." But that's enough. They're great guys. They both live out in this part of town. And Jerry raises cows, and so does Kenny, because they're retired. And we get together a lot, and they're helping redo the old house. And I have a lot of nieces and nephews. And we're just one more crazy family. When people talk about a normal family, I think, what is that?
So where did you go to elementary school?
I went to Jones Elementary School at 9th and Monroe. Then we moved because they were going to cut the interstate through. That's an interesting story about a case I had because it involved that neighborhood. And then...
Were you on Buchanan at that time?
No. My uncle and daddy had a store over there, but we moved to Bordeaux, and I went to Bordeaux Elementary, and then they built the house that I grew up in, and I went to Isaac Litton High School to high school.
So what street did you grow up on?
8th Avenue North, right there at the middle of it. But that I was sitting in court, and I knew next to nothing about condemnation. I don't know what you learned, but I had that short thing in law school, and anyhow, I had to become an expert. And I'd read all these books and talked to Joe Loser, and this little old man is representing himself. He and his daughter, well, she was 65, and he was in his 90s. And he lived right where you come down 8th Avenue and start down to 65, that little house that's still there. Well, he started to sell it, and the title company ran a title, and they said, "This is not your house, this is the state of Tennessee's." So he had been trying to get the state to straighten it out. And I had to send upstairs, and it was back when the deed was so old, they backed them with blue paper and rolled them up and stuck them in a box. And I read that deed, and I look at the state, and I said, what seems to be the problem? I had Charlie Frazier, all those experts on condemnation had made a fortune on 65. And I said, this man, what are y'all going to do to straighten this out? And they said, "Your Honor, we don't think any of us have any liability." And I said, "Well, we're going to see, because you transferred the wrong piece of property, and you took his house, and I'm going to authorize him, if you don't pay him in 10 days, to put a toll gate across the entrance to 65 that's on his property, because he still owns it." And, everybody just stood there, and they said, "Well, Judge, you can't do that." And the state of Tennessee attorney said, "Judge, what's your authority?" And I'd already looked it up and knew, and I said, "I believe you better look at what my authority is to correct a mistake." And that little man moved in with his daughter, got his money. But can you imagine? He'd paid the taxes for 32 years and found out he didn't own the house. But North Nashville was a strange place. I had a scooter, big sandbox in the backyard. We made mud pies. Jones was a sweet little school that had lots of different levels economically and otherwise, and had wonderful teachers. When I got ready to run for judge, Miss Myers and Miss Tucker addressed hundreds of postcards to retired teachers. And I guess that made me, I was so proud that they still thought I was smart and they loved me.
What was your best high school memory that you think?
Oh, gracious. I think that the atmosphere there was a lot like you see at smaller private schools. Everybody went to the football game on Friday night. Everybody. You had an early supper and you went. The men's club got together and built that band room because we were building a band. Mr. Swore And we had the Marching 100. It was the most famous band in the state. It was just awesome. Excuse me. And it was just a wonderful place to grow up. Great teachers, a winning football team, good neighbors. I walked to school with Papa John Gordy's son. He'd been kicked out of Ryan. We called him Pookie. I get to UT, and he's 3 years ahead of me. And he comes over and hugs me and tells everybody, you better be good to her. I didn't know he was All-American and captain of the football team. I'd walked to school with him for years, and, he was just good old John Gordy. And then a lot of good neighbors. I wish every child had the advantages. And we were not wealthy. We were just average people. I got a good education in a good private public school.
How did you get to the University of Tennessee when I was living?
Daddy had helped a boy by mostly doing the boy's job, but he was Daddy's assistant, and he had gone through Vanderbilt. And nobody in my family had ever gone to college, not either side. And Daddy just was determined I was going to go to Vanderbilt. And I went out there, and I didn't fit at that time. I knew nothing about college campuses. I just, and guidance teachers then, as now, probably don't know any more than you know. And I told my children, and I think it's really important, you have to find the fit for you. The only requirement is that you make good enough grades that you can transfer, because you and I can't pick where our children go to school. UT was, I can't tell you what an education it was. I heard words that I'd never heard before. I drug girls in. I was a counselor in the dorm. I drug girls in that broke rules, and it was just a different world. I was just so naive. Just didn't have any idea what to expect of a big school like that.
So was anybody else from Litton going to UT, or did you just strike out?
Well, John Gordy was captain of the football team, but he was a senior. No, there were nobody that I knew. And I'm sure there were some, but
UT was kind of far back then. There wasn't any interstate.
No, it wasn't any interstate. And Daddy wouldn't let me drive home. I had to fly home. I couldn't ride with anybody else. He didn't trust them. It was. And he gave me, my daddy, having not had any experience, I had so much a week to spend. And if I did not make all A's and B's, then I had to come home. And he meant it. I knew he meant it. But I'll tell you, the morning he took me up there, he had what he called potty talks. Okay? So if it was your turn to be chewed out, he'd call you in there while he's shaving. And he would let it fly. So I was all packed and ready to go, and he was in there shaving. He called me into the bathroom, and he said, sit down. And I sat down, and I thought, God, I'm fixing to leave home. What's he going to say to me? And he said, I know you think I'm going to chew you out about something, but said, I called you in here to give you my philosophy for life. And then I know if you live by it, you'll never have to worry. He said, live each day so the next morning you can face your God. And I never forgot that. Every time I was tempted to really do something I shouldn't be doing, I think about, well, how am I going to feel in the morning? And then he had a big old tear on his cheek because he didn't want me to leave home. And he took me to Knoxville, and he said, good luck. And that's how he meant it. Good luck. You know what the rules are.
No cell phones, no constant calls.
No. Oh, no. Well, now they told me I could call any time I wanted to, but that first year he was so funny about riding with a bunch of punks. And then the next year I had a car, and then the next year I flew a lot because I graduated early. So,
what did you love about UT? Because I know you're a huge college fan.
I loved the atmosphere. I was in a special class that they looked at our LSAT, our SATs and ACTs, And the man that started Oak Ridge was our professor, and we met every Saturday morning. And I could take anything I wanted to take. You know, I didn't have to have a specific thing in mind. And I liked that. I liked, the best of all, that there were people from all over the state. I regretted then, as I regret now, that there were not any African Americans at that time, maybe one or two. But, some of the girls in the dorm came from very poor backgrounds. Some of them came from very, very wealthy backgrounds. Some of the boys did. It was just like the real world ought to be, a little bit of everything. And if you wanted to be a bum and take the easiest courses, you certainly could graduate and not be able to read. But, I loved theater in the round. I loved the Shakespeare. I mean, all those things. I still read my complete works of William Shakespeare that I had in class, and economics. Oh, I loved it. History.
What's your major? After all this opportunity to major, what takes me so?
Well, I have probably a triple major: nutrition, economics, and history. And because we got technical, because we were in that class, we got these technical. I could be a nutritionist if I'd just done my internship, but I just wasn't interested. I taught under a federal grant. I had almost a math major. I thought for a while I was going to be a doctor, and then I fell in love and wanted to get out of school quick and get married, and that bit the dust.
Before we get into the love of your life, were there extracurricular activities that you did at school that you loved?
The first go-around, I didn't pledge a sorority because I didn't know anybody in a sorority and didn't understand all that. And the second go-around in December, I pledged. And the president of the sorority is still a really good friend. I talked to her. And, you may know her brothers, the Harbs. Do you know any Harbs in Knoxville? Joe Harb was a doctor here. Anyhow, they sell rugs, Charlie Howell, all that bunch. Well, anyhow, she said, now you're going to be the pledge class leader. And I said, no, because I'm not that kind of person. I'm real introverted. And I guess of the extracurricular activities that I truly enjoyed I was head of the publication council. So I could not only control a lot of money, I controlled the editorial policy of the newspaper, and all that stuff. And then I loved mortarboard. I thought mortarboard was, we tried to do a lot of good things for the campus, and at that time, the campus was so male-dominated, the money, everything, and mortarboard tried to change a lot of that, scholarships mainly, and but it was a good thing to do.
Do you really think you were introverted?
I still am.
You are. Really?
I think I can play the role well, but I also can sit on a lake and fish and not say a word for hours, and I love to sit and read. If I have a choice, other than my children and grandchildren, good friends, I don't like chattery cocktail parties where, they're being nice to me because I'm a judge. Yeah. And now I meet new people that I like. But I think that, and I do, being a political wife well, because I remember names and, But I think a lot of that is not very meaningful. I mean, yeah.
Tell me about meeting Joe.
Oh, Lord, I never...
Tell me.
Oh, I started having breakfast at this little drugstore right up there on campus. And he had 3 buddies. I didn't know they were his buddies. But we just got where we ate breakfast every morning. And there was always something funny going on. And they sang and I sang. They played bridge and And one day they said, why don't you come over to the fraternity house for lunch? And I said, well, I might do that. So they said, we'll meet you at the bottom of the hill. And so we start up the hill to the Pike House, and they said, that boy up there's going to be a big man on campus. And I swear to you, he had on striped pants and a checkered shirt, like a country bumpkin. I said, really? And so I come home. I met him at the house. It was no big deal. I come home, and he calls. It's January. And now, keep in mind, I never had a date with him, didn't know him from Adam. He wanted me to go to a bowl game with he and these other guys. And they're good dates. And I said, well, I've got too much planned with my people I've been dating. I'm not interested. Killed his soul. And he was a big man on campus. But and we rocked along, and I was dating this guy. Oh, he was a hunk. Baby blue Chevrolet convertible, plenty of money, big man on campus. And Joe kept calling. And so finally I said, okay. I had a fight with this other guy. And we started dating occasionally, and then we started dating. And so this other guy takes him to the mountain to tell him how to treat me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And yeah. And it made me mad at both of them. I didn't want to go out with either one of them anymore. But we started dating, and my dad and I taught him how to grill one time when we came home. And I went up to the farm. One time.
Farm is what? What are you talking about?
He was from Castellan Springs. And he had worked at Huntsville because he was an engineer before he went to law school. And so then we decided we were going to get married, and I came home and told my daddy, and Daddy said, well, I'll tell you what, you'll be poor your whole life. And I said, well, I'm going to marry him anyhow. And Daddy said, okay, you can have a huge wedding or you can have a house. And I said, I'll take the wedding. And I said, we want to get married September the 5th.
And what year is this?
That was in 59. And Daddy said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I said, what do you mean? He said, that's the day before your birthday, and you will get one present the rest of your life. So I go back to Knoxville, and I said, well, Daddy says that's the dumbest thing he's ever heard of. Well, Joe had to go back to school. He hadn't graduated, and football season opened. And I said, Daddy says you'll only give me one present the rest of my life. He said, I swear to God, I'll give you 2 presents. And every year since then, I get one present on the 5th, and I get another one on the 6th. My good friend's daddy was assistant plant manager, and he had taught me. I'd go hunting with them and fishing, and he called one day and he said, we have missed you. He said, there's a dance at the country club this 2 weeks. Said, why don't you come home? Well, I was the only one working. I mean, it was tight. I said, I was a chemist on a government grant, and we tested the adrenaline of the astronauts for their stability. Had a top secret clearance. Anyhow, you didn't know that, did you?
I never knew that. And now you're doing that in Nashville?
Well, I know. Joe was in school in Knoxville.
In Knoxville.
So I said, Pop, we just can't afford to come home. I said, it's just too. He said, well, I'll arrange an interview and we'll pay your way home. I said, well, Joe may not be interested. And Joe said, well, yeah, I'll interview him. And at that time, he wanted to go to work for Caterpillar and go to law school and do patent law. So we came home, had the best time. And Lord DuPont offered him the highest salary in his class. I mean, and Joe was not way up in his class for him to get the highest. And we discussed moving back to Nashville. And so we did, and we've been here ever since. Isn't that amazing?
So what was your first home? Where was it?
Oh, you won't believe this. Of course, we had no furniture. Our first apartment in Knoxville was furnished, and it was a 3rd-floor dump. My daddy said, you're not living in that dump. And I said, yes, I am. Anyhow, we came home, and we didn't have a stick of furniture. We didn't have anything but our clothes. And there was a lady in Old Hickory that rented part of her house furnished, and you had access to the kitchen. So we lived in We lived in Old Hickory, sharing a house with this old lady who was a biddy. Oh. And then we found a rental house, and we started accumulating furniture, and I started refinishing junk. And
So you lived in Old Hickory in the early years?
we lived in Old Hickory, and then we lived in Inglewood, and then we moved to Madison, and then we moved here.
So tell me about you in the 60s. What was going on in your life
Oh.
that decade?
You know, it was so interesting. I was pregnant 4 times in 6 years. I was trying to teach school, and every time my check went to pay on the notes for Joe's education. So when people talk about it, he had a lot of bills. And when they'd make me quit teaching, because you couldn't teach when you were pregnant, I'd go to work for this gift shop in the arcade. And I'll tell you about that. But it was a strange thing. The last, third pregnancy, I had the best teaching job, because I was teaching accelerated 7th and 8th graders science and math, and it was just
Where was that?
awesome. At Two Rivers, and it was awesome. Well, I turned up pregnant again, and a doctor told me I couldn't get pregnant. You know, that was a bunch of bull. But and I trusted this doctor. He's not practicing anymore, thank God. But anyhow, I got a job during the summer. You won't believe this, typing a technical manual for a chemical company, because I could read the chemistry, you know. Anyhow, the head of Board of Education, school system called me and wanted me to teach a day or two. School had started the day before, and a teacher had quit. And they didn't have anybody to teach accelerated kids at Madison High School. Well, the principal at Madison High School was a good friend of mine, and his son and I graduated together, so I knew him. And I told Mr. Frazier, I said, I am not teaching for what you pay substitutes for. You made me quit. You know I'm pregnant. But you're willing to make an exception and pay me nothing a day to come until you find somebody. And the person had to be certified to teach under Title V. And so I turned it down. 2 or 3 days later, he calls again. I said, no, I want full pay and benefits. Maybe for 2 days. You may find somebody in 2 days. But I'm not doing it. So Mr. DePriest, my friend's daddy, called me. And I said, Mr. DePriest, it's a matter of principle with me. There was no reason for me to quit teaching because I'm pregnant. And you know what? He approved it. I went to work, and I talked to the week before that baby came. Went up and down the steps every day. And I quit January the 22nd or 3rd and had the baby the next week. But, we were poor, and we had to have the money to pay. And then he had started to law school, and, that rotates everything.
So when did he graduate?
He started practicing in 1967.
So how many children did you have at the time? Tell me about.
I had 3. I had a little girl in between that had died. So I had 3 babies, and I had done all of his research for him while he was in law school and written his papers and, that.
But you came to he worked at DuPont.
Hmm?
Then you went to Knoxville.
No, we stayed here. No, he went to the night law school.
Okay, he went to the national school.
Yeah, and when he decided to open his own law practice in North Nashville, and we were going to do all this social work, which we did, I started wanting to go back and get my job. And they told me I had to go back to school and get 16 hours. I don't know how much. And I thought, well, we can't afford that. So I took an adult education course in typing and became his legal secretary. And we opened that office in North Nashville. And, this is not being petty, but A. Birch and Avon got all the big cases of the African-American world. And we got all the pitiful ones. Like, I tutored people to take the SATs and ACTs, and we helped them fill out their forms to go to. And I got a pediatrician to move in the building with us, and he would do their physicals for free. And it was a great experience.
So where was your office?
At 16th and Buchanan. My uncle said, if you'll come over here and open a law office, I'll build a building. And we said, well, so we filed income taxes the first year and found out, we could make a living. And so I wore blue jeans every day and supervised the construction of an office building.
And the year it opened was what?
Margaret, I'm not sure, 69 or 70. It was amazing. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
So you were just a secretary and a mom of 3.
I was a secretary and a mom of 3. I was a room mother for all 3. And I coached a softball team and had a scout troop. I was busy.
So Judge Haynes, you are doing all these things. You're balancing being a mom and wife and working at the same time. Of course, you've done that ever since your kids were born. So what made you decide that you had an interest in actually being a lawyer yourself?
Well, I went to law school for the wrong reasons, probably. We had this friend, and he was a client. He was a metro policeman. And he had married in high school, had a baby, and divorced. And later married somebody else and had 4 children. And she ran the family businesses. And they had a used car lot and 90 rental houses. And she took care of it all. And he was a racing fan, and he loved to race cars. And he got killed racing a car. And Wilma calls us one morning crying, ex-wife has tied up every dime they have. And she had to go borrow money to live on. So just casually at lunch to the lawyers, and by this time Joe had 4 associates. And I said, it's so sad about Wilma. She's having to go to the bank to borrow money till Joe can get the estates halfway straight out. And this lawyer said, well, that's what's going to happen to you. I said, what do you mean? And I'm really careless about property and money. I mean, it's not that important to me. He said, well, how much money have you got in your billfold right now? And before I could say $6 or $7, he said, how much is in your checking account? And I opened checking, and I said, $26. And he said, if Joe gets killed today, that's all you'll have till we settle all these files in the estate. And I looked at him and I thought, here I am working for free, and I've got 3 babies. If you think, so that night I said, Joe, I'm going out to Vanderbilt and talk to him about finishing my master's and getting a job. And sure enough, I did. And, of course, they were desperate for women, and particularly in the science field. And I went over to the chemistry lab. And I walked in that lab, and it just dawned on me I had changed. I didn't want to be isolated, locked up, highly technical, secret. We've been in heart research. So I come back home, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to be able to take care of these children, because my favorite mentor besides you, Margaret, told me one time that every woman is one man away from welfare. And so Joe said, well, why don't you try law school? Because I'd been writing briefs, doing research, typing. And so I took one course and I was hooked. And the next year I started law school. And, it was a wonderful ride. I wasn't Mrs. Anybody. I wasn't Mama. I loved every book, every class.
So you started what year? 72?
72, yeah. I was trying to think. No, 73. Yeah, 72.
And so you worked all day, took care of your kids, and went to school at night for 4 years.
Well, I was lucky. I was working for my husband. So I left every day in time to pick him up at school. I came home and fixed dinner, and he had to be home at X because I walked out that door and drove to school and came home. And I studied at night, and I studied in the car because the children, the best thing that ever happened to me in studying was driving from here to MBA every morning. Because in the afternoon I'd sit and study, and I listened to tapes. And so it was not that bad. It really wasn't.
And you graduated top of the class.
second. I would have been first. But Joe was trying a case, and I wanted to help him. And so I didn't study for the final, and I got the second highest grade in the class. But I left out part of the story when I decided I was addicted and I wanted to go to law school. I went out to Vanderbilt and talked to them. And, of course, they needed women, you know. And I made a yes and no chart. And, like, no, you won't be able to be a room mother if you're at Vanderbilt because, no, you won't be able to do this for the children. And finally I said, that's a whole lot of money, and it's very restrictive. And, of course, there was some scholarship money available for women, but it would have been so restrictive and so hard on the children, and they all played ball and sports. And so would I do it again? Yeah, because it was the best solution.
You knew you were going to stay in Nashville, too?
I knew I was going to stay in Nashville, and I did about 400 divorces for legal services, and then I worked 2 years as student assistant for Judge Shriver, Tommy Shriver, which was wonderful. And I could afford to do things like that where I couldn't have if I'd been at Vanderbilt.
So when you were going to law school, you did anticipate you would just go where you would go with the husband-wife team at the law firm, is that right? Or did you think you might?
No, I interviewed. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I got offered a job at NRL because I won the booking property. And I got in job of Tommy offered me a job. And
This is Tommy's right.
yeah, in the DA's office. And then I just decided, I can have more control of my life working with Joe. And I think you have to have that with children. I do. And it was a good choice. I mean, it really was. We worked well together, still do. People would say, how in the world can you stand it? And I'd say, well, you go home at night and somebody understands what Judge Swigert did to you today. I mean, well, you know how that was and how they treated us, and Judge Lester, and,
Judge Haynes, tell us about the time you spent before you decided to run for judge as a new lawyer.
Well, I told you I was certified to go to tax court and found out I didn't like that. And I was able to start representing 2 banks doing some of their collection. And then I represented them in bankruptcy, and that grew. So, those people were not interested whether I was a man or a woman. The other people were not quite as tolerant of a woman lawyer. And it was just a wonderful time. We did well financially. The children were doing well. But somehow, how deep down inside something's not really satisfying. And I'll never forget the day that I started thinking about running for judge. The man that I beat, I was in his court, criminal, and this young man had tried to kill himself. He was a senior at Vanderbilt. And so how they have the first call. I stood up and said, Judge so-and-so, I'm Barbara Haynes, and I represent Mr. So-and-so. And he's checking himself out of Vanderbilt, and he'll be here for the second call. And he started in talking about mental illness and mongoloids and monkeys in the trees and having to give driver's license for identification to Down syndrome. And he raved and raved and raved. And I just stood there. I couldn't believe it. So the break came, and I went out in the hall to find my client. Thankful my client had heard all that. Every lawyer out there said, that's why you need to run against him. That's how he treats people. And I said, oh, I'm not interested in being judge. I'd have to take a cut in pay. Yeah. They've never elected a woman judge. Yeah. And I get home, and the mental health association, everybody had started calling because they were desperate for somebody to run against him. And so then I talked to you and 2 or 3 more, and somehow we think it's, I don't say anything to Joe yet. One night he comes home. And at that time, I was legal counsel to the congressman and his treasurer.
That's
Congressman Bill Boner. So he comes home, and I said, Bill, we need to talk. I think I'm going to run for judge. He said, well, you're crazy. You'll take a big cut in pay. What am I going to do? You won't get to come to D.C. all the time? I said, I think I'm going to do it. Somebody needs to do it. And all these poor people that are mentally ill and just... So Joe comes home and I said, I talked to Bill today, and he said, you're going to do it, aren't you? And I said, unless you tell me not to. Somebody's got to beat that man. And so there you were, ready to organize me, and everybody said, you're crazy, you'll never beat a man, and, you know, and then the first 2 or 3 boxes, he beat me in 4 boxes. I got 100% of Bellmead Fire Hall, and just, you know, but it was his fault. He didn't deserve to be a judge. He was unkind, just ridiculous.
What was it like to consider being the first woman to be an incumbent in a county-wide race in Davidson County, which was 30 years ago?
Well, you know, it never occurred to me how hard it would be once we got through the election. You know, election day, I had worked the box where the incumbent worked, and his sister and his family. And when I got in the car with Joe, I said, you know, we've probably lost this, but maybe they've learned something. I've sure learned a lot, because I went to every yard sale, every construction site. That's all I did. I had a driver, and I wore out all those shoes and hose. And, I just never dreamed. I remember my friends from DuPont had a hunting club, and I grew up hunting and fishing, and they invited me to come speak. And one of the men said, he says you're going to end up pregnant. And I said, so? I won't have to have maternity clothes. The robe will look good overall. But I never dreamed how hard it would be. It wasn't...
Do you mean campaigning? What do you mean?
No, not campaigning. Campaigning was hard, but that first 2 or 3 or 4 years, you know, people would say, I want to see a real judge. And they'd call me Mrs. Haynes. And I spoke to the Downtown Exchange Club. I never will forget this. And the president said, gentlemen, can we pray? And I wrote him a note, and I said, I know I can't join this club, but I can't even pray with you. And I can't tell you how many letters came. Dear judges and Mrs. Haynes. And it was tough that, you know, every day, people, you know, there were certain lawyers you knew were going to give you a bad time because they didn't want a woman on the bench. And it was just, and finally, I guess it'd been 3 or 4 years, and I said, on a huge criminal, I said, I'm going to tell you all something. I'm going to take judicial notice that I'm a woman. And from now on, you say, I please the court. You don't say, yes, sir. And I never will forget when I got to circuit.
And what year is that?
In 1990. There was a huge case. And Jim Neal was one of the attorneys. And they wanted to continue a bunch of things because he was still on the Alaska and that case, when it was Valdez. And he comes in. And you know Jim, I love Jim, and he was from Portland up here, but he could be so arrogant sometimes. And he comes in, and Aubrey's with him, and half the Nashville bar. And, yeah. And, yeah, he said something, and I said, Mr. Neal so-and-so, and he said, yes, sir, Your Honor. And you could have dropped a pin. Well, that night, I didn't know we were going to the governor's mansion for dinner. And we walk in the front door, and there he is. And I mean, Aubrey, everybody had chewed him out. And before I could say a word, he said, I just want you to know, I will never make that mistake again. And I will teach our young associates and I am so sorry. And I'm saying all this because Aubrey and my wife are going to kill me if I don't. But it was hard. It was hard.
I think you took a trip with Joe once to Texas.
Oh, no. The court asked me to go to this technical conference because of my background. I mean, you know, there are a lot of judges that had just history or something, but I had enough technical background. And this was on the future of technology in the courts. And what's the case that decided? Starts with a D, about...
The
Daubert, okay. So I get in there, and the first thing that happens, we walk in the hotel, and they're all walking over to Joe and saying, Judge, 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 and he'd say. So the next morning, it was a 5-day conference, and Joe and I have breakfast, and I walk in. And there may have been some other women there, but I was the only one there as a judge. And they put me at a table. Everybody's at a table of 10, and I have 10 men sitting at my table. And that first day, they did not say a word to me. And if I'd ask a question, they just sort of ignore me. So the second day, the man next to me and the man across start talking about how to cook a goose and a duck. And I said, that's not how I do it. And they said, really? I said, yeah, I have a duck blind, and I cook it all the time. And they said, well, what do you do different? And I started telling them how I cook wild duck and wild goose. From that point on, I was their favorite person. I have one now that still sends me cookbooks on how to cook duck and geese and all kind of stuff.
How is it that you connect, especially in those early years as judge, with the men, you know, that were in the positions in the legal profession, whether judges or lawyers? How is it that you think that you came to connect with them?
You know, I've asked myself, the first secret I had was you and some of the women lawyers. But then we were also involved in some other campaigns, Judge Kurtz, Brandt, you know, we can name some others. So Ashley at Legal Services knew that I had represented all those people, Gordon Bonneman, you know, we can go through those people. So they were my supporters. The rest of them, and I decided that probably, other than my good friends, I adopted the attitude of be overly prepared, ready on every case, and don't abuse the power. And so, you know, if school teachers mark everything with red pencils, you know that. And so when I would read briefs, and I think that I worked double time to prove that I could do the job. And with the support of you and Walter.
You talking about Walter Curtis.
Yeah, Ashley Wilshire. When Lamar was looking for a chairman of the Sentencing Commission.
This is Governor Lamar.
Yeah, and Lamar's a good friend, honey. But anyhow, I called some people to ask them, and I said, you know, they were fixing to put them all in jail and find the state. Who would take on that? Oh, Walter said, do it. And Ashley and Gordon, you know, everybody said, do it, do it, do it. And he promised me that it would be a diverse board. Okay. I walk into the first meeting, and it's 14 white men and me.
And you're the chair.
Yeah, I'm the chair. And I'll look at them, and they, you know, there's another place that I had to prove that I was as smart as they are.
Tell us what came out of the Sentencing Commission, because I know you should be very proud of this.
Well, I think it was an eye-opener. I visited every prison in the state, spoke to every lawyer's group, every county commission. I was appalled at some of the language in the old statute and how DAs fought every change. It needed updating, but it also was antiquated. and the pressure was on them. I'll have to say that. But I never will forget Sue Kay and I traveled this state speaking, explaining it to people, and getting their ideas, and having meetings on different sections of the code. And one of our prominent Nashville senators said that only a virtuous woman could be raped, and that a little boy couldn't be raped. And Joe Collins said, "You got to come down here and talk to this man." And so there were situations that, and nobody thought we could pass it, because we didn't have any money for coffee or dinner or drinks. We did our own copy, and Sue and I pushed that. It was the biggest bill ever passed at the time it passed. Now, it helped that I had a husband who was a lawyer and a state senator, and I knew all the lawyers. And then I think it was a culmination. They knew they had to do something. I had talked at great length with the first man that had attempted to write the code 6 years before. And he was fresh out of Vandy Law School, and he took the job. And they defeated his little bill in one afternoon. House and Senate. Nobody even read it. And then I had some wonderful, wonderful minds helping. And those men that were on the Sentencing Commission, I added ad hoc some college professors. And by this time it's Ned Ray, and he doesn't like lawyers. And one of the worst times, and I'll tell you this, we're working like everything to get it finished and to get it passed where it'll change. And the master, we had a prison master, called me from Hawaii. He was doing that, and he said, "You need to get out to federal court. Your governor has walked in to see the judge." And I thought, dear God, surely you jest. And sure enough, the marshal calls and said, "Barbara, you better get out here. Judge Higgins is fixing to lose it." And so I went down there, and I heard him say, "And don't you ever go see a judge again. And Mr. Matthews, you know better." And I thought, oh.
Mr. Matthews.
It was Harlan Matthews, Governor McWhorter, just taking it upon himself to go see the judge in the case where the state is the litigant.
And this was about
This was right before we passed it in '89. He was, it was a mess.
the lawsuit was about the prison system being under supervision of a...
Well, it was overcrowding. It was about DB, the horrible, inhumane treatment that they gave the mentally ill out there. And it was just, the whole thing was just a mess.
And when did it pass?
In '89.
And what was the impact?
What was the impact? Well, for the next year and a half, I was the resident expert in federal and state court on anything that came up. I mean, just anything. And federal judges have a lot of power. And one of the federal judges says, "We want you to come and do so-and-so." What do you say? One of them served me with a subpoena down at the Legislative Plaza. I've never been so embarrassed in all my life. It was like being served with a criminal warrant. And I said, well, all he had to do was call me. He didn't have to. But it was one of those things that I said needed to be done, and I thought I could do it, and I hired a really great staff, better than I, more competent, brilliant, and we were able to pull it together. And it was, looking back on it, it was fun, most of it. There were some parts that weren't so much fun.
And you did this while you were General Sessions Judge.
I did.
Tell me about what it was like to be a General Sessions Judge, just the day-to-day. I know sometimes you wore a red robe.
I did.
What was it?
I had flowers.
Yeah, talk about
I
that.
had flowers on the bench, and I think that knowing who my predecessor was, I brought humanity to it. And I think some of the judges had been there so long that it was drudgery. And I was determined to change some things, to clean out the jail, not let people sit in jail, not have hearings, not continue things for weeks. Once again, being a rebel rouser, I just was going to change things. And we did change a lot of things. We changed the mental health laws and cleaned up what they did at Middle Tennessee. And I would have stayed there and told them if they would give me one docket, either one of the criminal, full time, and I'd take the old courtroom over there behind the jail. And, you know, they didn't want to give up. They didn't want to change anything. And I said, then I'm going to run for circuit. They said, you can't win circuit. I said, fine, I can go back and practice law and make a living. Because I just hated the rotation that didn't make any sense. And the wasted time just drove me insane.
Can you give an example of what happened on the mental health docket that was something that you thought made an impact?
Oh, there was so much out there that I hated in it. D. Berry just drove me insane. What D. Berry would do, her ex is tried in Greenville, Tennessee, and by reason of insanity, whatever, he gets what. As soon as he got in here, they take him off their medicine because they wouldn't spend the money to appoint a guardian ad litem to give them their meds, and that's intolerable. Then, when their sentence was up, about 3 months earlier, they'd send them over to Middle Tennessee to be re-medicated after all those years. And the practice, this just sounds so deplorable. They had an old man that represented every litigant in Middle Tennessee. And he was so incompetent, never interviewed them. And I had done some of the circuit court as a volunteer, as a lawyer, so I knew how to represent them. And I could not tolerate it. It was just awful. And so Mary Walker and you and some more knew what it was like out there. And that doesn't happen anymore, but it was not even a trial. You know, it was deplorable. You know that.
So you're mentioning circuit. What attracted you about the circuit court bench?
You told me I had to do it.
I don't think that.
Well, I had been obviously thinking about it, but I never will forget. I went to some fundraiser in the Legislative Plaza, and you met me, and you said, regardless of what they ask you, the press are going to ask you, tell them you're considering running. It was the Nashville Bar Banquet that night. And we went down to the Nashville Bar Banquet, and you said, now remember, anybody that asks you, you say, yes, I'm considering it. Because the judge was there, y'all backed, and he was resigning, and he had handpicked, without talking about it, who he wanted. And I never will forget meeting Frank Gorell outside afterwards, and he said, now you ladies have to wait your turn. We're going to take care of you. Just be patient. And, wait your turn. How many times did we hear that?
So you ran,
and I won.
Did you have any opposition?
Yeah, but I can't remember who he was. What's his name was going? Cliff Knowles was going to run, and then
he's magistrate judge. So
yeah.
What was different about circuit than general sessions?
Oh, I think you had no question. I had some constitutional questions in general sessions, but I had deeper issues in circuit. It took more research. It took more thinking legalistically. I had the opportunity to write opinions, and it was just more mentally challenging. After, once you've done general sessions a couple of years or 3, you can just, every once in a while you have a real legal technical question. The Supreme Court had decided that they would have this expert come in on case management in Cookeville, and all the presiding judges across the state were going. And because we couldn't get another judge in Nashville, and we were sinking, I had 1,300 and something cases. So they sent us. So we went, and we decided to have an all-day session at my house out there around the pool about the things that this man had suggested. Scheduling orders, mediation, a lot of things. And there was some really resistance among us. But we finally had one more meeting at Judge Gaden's house. We agreed we would try court mediation, and we would do scheduling orders. We would have a central docket. I mean, we agreed to a lot of things that changed the course of it in Nashville. But anyhow, so we mark a calendar off, and I'd mediate 1 week, and they'd do all the trial, and then Judge Kurtz would mediate, and you'd rotate like that. Well, nobody really liked it but Judge Shipley and I. And Judge Gaden, okay. And then I got the first big case that, I got 2 big cases that had been up to the Supreme Court. One of them involved the abortion clinics. And the other one involved Tom Nevels, who had just defended himself in federal court, came back out, and the plaintiffs asked him to pick up their case. And, of course, you had every lawyer in town because the coverage was astronomical for a bug spraying company. And I settled all of those cases. So pretty soon, they were calling and saying, Barbara, I've got this really big case. It'll take 6 weeks to try. Will you take it? And pretty soon, I was the only one doing mediations besides Marietta. And so they agreed for me to give up non-jury cases. And, I learned so much. You just won't believe what I learned.
I kind of want to put you on the spot, but what do you think it is about you and your personality that could get all those complex cases settled?
I think part of it is that they come in there expecting to settle it. That's number one. And number two, they also know I'm very rigid and anal. The rules are the rules. I sit down in complex order. Here's what you have to do. Here's who has to be present. This is what's going to happen. And I remember 2 cases distinctly. This man was risk manager for a huge national trucking company. And he was on the job trained. He has no formal. But they flew him in here. And he was so ugly to me because I was a mere woman. And I certainly couldn't know about trucking lines and the insurance coverage. And I just called, who was the lawyer? Not Jim Durant, Steve. And so I said, Steve Cox, I said, let me tell you something. We've got 1 more session. Now, I don't care whether you settle this case or not, but I'll tell you this, if he opens his mouth rudely again, he's going to be found in contempt of court. And boy, he came back in the next day, and But when you're dealing in those complex cases, you're always dealing with a consortium of insurance. They can be from all over the world. You're dealing with lawyers from everywhere. And I get tickled because the lawyer from New York will call somebody here in town and say, what do you know about Barbara Haynes? And they'll say, well, what do you want to know? And they say, Nashville will say, well, you can't get in there for mediation. Because somebody has said that I mediated a lot of big cases. The worst one I ever had, and it is so funny, I had 2 doctors that had sued each other in malpractice. Have I told you about this?
I don't think so.
And they were so bitter. Oh, they were so bitter. And each of them was so afraid that the other one would write a book about it. And eventually I just let them both roar the first day. And I said, well, it seems to me that you all should have sat down face to face and worked out an agreement not to write a book. And then you can get to the insurance coverage because it's just about money then, and neither one of you need money. Oh, and the other one, the biggest one, and this little lady, I still see her. She must be 100. I see her at T-Pack. These 2 men were brothers, and they owned one of the biggest manufacturing companies in Nashville. And one of them had just paid the other one $37 million for the company. And they are fighting over a work comp. And Judge Shipley had the case, and the 2 wives came, and these 2 men's wives did not get along. And they got in a fight out in the hall. 2 women did, smacking each other. And you had 2 fine lawyers, and this was a Jewish family. So Judge Shipley called and said, would you try to settle this before they kill each other? I said, okay, so I signed 2 days, and the first day was just on and on and on and on about he didn't invite me to his bar mitzvah, and yeah. And the 2 lawyers that already spent over $100,000 one in 97 with the other one, over a $10,000 work comp. I mean, they just... So the next day they come in, and I said, oh, let me tell you what the rules are. Yeah. Well, we end up, and they had already dedicated something at Vanderbilt to the daddy, and we dedicated a room to the mother. They agreed to take their aged mother to lunch every week without their wives. And they set up a trust. Well, and they paid their attorneys. Months go by, and you don't like to see a judge drinking. So I'm at TPEC, and I have a glass of wine. By the way, they sent me a piece of stupid glass from Tiffany's that I had to send back, but that's beside the point. I'm standing there with this glass of wine, and this little old lady comes hobbling over there like I do now. And she said, I just loved you. And I thought, oh, my God. And I don't know who she is from Adam, okay? She says, I have been to some of the best places, and I don't have to put up with those horrible daughter-in-laws, and it's just the best experience to see my sons. And I thought,
Oh, so wonderful.
so mediation just became a thing, and I think most of it's just being a good listener.
Well, and also understanding relationships and figuring out what people really need.
Well, and I also think, if you chose to send me 100 pages, there are some mediators that only want a half a page. There are some cases that it takes a whole lot. I read everything that they send in, so sometimes I know more than the lawyers do about the case.
You also became so well known for the work you did in condemnation cases. Talk a little bit about your work in that.
God, I look around Nashville, and almost every development you see, I had condemnations in my court. And I met some of the most interesting people with the most diverse interest. Suddenly a mom and pop little house is worth $10 million. And suddenly the people from the mission are worth $40 an hour because this company's trying to make money. And it was just amazing. Judge Loser was just wonderful. His book, it's on condemnation. I walked the stadium, so I knew every plat down there, and I wasn't ready to take any crap off anybody. And I got into it with the commissioner. We moved Nashville Bridge down to Cheatham County, okay? And it was sold. And the state paid about $37 million. They went out to dinner the night before the mediation. But the state couldn't pay those little people on Trinity Lane $1,500, $2,600. We'd settled them all. They waited weeks. And that was to pay their property tax. And it was just a right-of-way. So I called the Attorney General. I said, I know you have a lot to do. Have all the orders gone up that I signed? They said they have. And I said, well, what seems to be the commissioner's problem with writing all these checks? They said, Judge, we don't know. We've tried to rush him, and, we don't have any authority with him. So I called the governor's lawyer, Hardy Mays, who's now a federal judge, that I loved. Brilliant. And I said, Hardy, I have a real problem, and you need to help me solve it before it becomes a news item. He said, well, Barbara, what's the problem? And I said, well, these little people, it wasn't just Trinity Lane. What's the other lane? Anyhow, it doesn't matter, but there were about 50 claims of just nothing compared to $37 million I can do. And I said, you need to go talk to the commissioner and release those checks. So he calls me in a couple of days. He said, Barbara, he won't listen to me. And he doesn't believe you'll do anything. I said, you need to call him. I said, okay. So I pick a morning and I call him. I say, "This is Barbara Haynes. I'd like to speak to Commissioner so-and-so." And they said, "Oh, he's expecting your call." So without telling me, and I really couldn't care less, by this point I've had it, he has a whole staff of lawyers in there. And he puts me on a speakerphone. But I didn't know that either. And he said, "Judge, let me tell you the process and the law." Now, he's not even a lawyer. And I hear all these people say, I said, "Commissioner, let me stop you. I wrote part of that law. I know the law. And I certainly know the process. Now, I know where the order goes and who has to sign off on the checks. But I want to know where these checks are." "Well, you don't understand how busy I am," he said. I said, "Well, you paid a Texas company $37 million. I said, "Well, you were not so busy that you couldn't hand-deliver the check and then take them to the Palm to dinner last night." Because somebody told me that. And I said, "I want to tell you what your choices are." I said, "When I sign an order, you have 30 days to appeal it. And then it's final if you don't appeal it. Now, if, in fact, these people don't get those checks in 10 days, first I'm going to call a press conference. And then I'm going to hold you in contempt because you are subject to my order." And he said, "Well, Judge, I didn't know it was that serious." And I said, "No, it's not that serious. Those are your choices. You either pay the money into court, you appeal it, or you send these people their checks. That's your choices." So he said, "Hardy will get back with you," Hardy Mays. So the next day, Hardy called me and said, "Did you mean to cause a tornado?" And I said, "I did." And I said, "All those checks were on his desk, weren't they? Just waiting." And he said, "They were. But those people were not that big a deal to him." So anyhow, from that point on, the state lawyers were so tickled that I did that. We had no more trouble getting little bitty checks. And every time I see that commissioner now, of course, he laughs. He said, "You taught me a lesson." I said, "I didn't teach you a lesson." I said, "You had lawyers. I just told you what the law was and what was going to happen." And I would have. I would have found him in contempt because I had told him to send the checks. And those little old people were pitiful. They just cried when they got the checks and called me. So, but to him,
What other areas that you think that you particularly enjoyed handling?
Well, I didn't like divorce, I can tell you that. I loved medical malpractice. I loved products liability. I liked work comp. I liked things that had some depth. I've handled some divorces when I was practicing, and certainly some for legal services, but Judge Kurtz and I would take any that Judge Robinson, Judge Slippy had a conflict on. And it seemed to me so many times that it was lack of control of the lawyers over their clients, and if they were misusing their parenting role. I'll tell you one case that Muriel sent up there, Judge Robinson. Now, they had been divorced. There was a 10-year-old child involved. And they were in this god-awful fight over picking a private school. And I listened to 3.5 hours. And they alleged, and I say alleged because I don't believe it, I think they just like fighting and embarrassing this child, that it was about which prayer. She liked one prayer at this school and he liked the prayer at the other school. And I sat there and I thought, I didn't go to law school to be a referee. And I said, I want to tell you all something. You have 10 minutes to go out in the hall and choose the private school that you want. And just in case you wonder, I'm an authority on private schools. I've paid a lot of tuition. Now, you ask those lawyers, and then you won't have a choice because I'm going to put in the order where she goes to school and everything about it. Now, do you understand? And I saw the husband ask his lawyers after her, will she really do that? And this lawyer, who knows me well, said, watch her. And sure enough, they went out in the hall and picked a school. But I just thought, now, that's a waste of taxpayers' money. But there was really nothing I hated. I even liked the small fender benders.
Well, your colleagues chose you to be a presiding judge, and you were presiding judge at a particularly difficult in our history of judiciary.
I would not take that job again.
Can you just, I know it could be, I know that could be a long story, and I know.
No, I'll cut it short, but
just for a part of a point in your career,
Wait,
to really
was.
talk about what you faced.
I learned so much. Well, the first thing that happened, they were redoing the courtrooms, and my office was in the basement. And
What year is this?
I can't remember. I do not remember that.
Do you remember who was mayor? Was that Mayor Purcell? No, maybe before.
I think it was Purcell. I can't remember. Isn't that awful? I should remember it like it was yesterday. Anyhow, Bredesen was mayor because he would cut through my little office. And the first thing that happened is across the hall they were building something and it flooded, and we had to put all the files up, and we worked half the night. But I was going to a wedding on Sunday at the governor's mansion. Jimmy Naphy was getting married. And I had a car phone then because I was judging the city of Goodlettsville too, and the phone rings and it's Torrey Johnson, the district attorney, and he said, "Judge, you need to come down here." And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "At the courthouse." And I said, "Well, I can't. I'm on the way to a wedding." And he said, "No, Judge, the feds are here, and you've got to come." And he said, "Judge Everett has killed himself," and he starts in. So we turn around and come back to town from West End, and I walk in, and there, because a federal investigation had been going on that most people didn't know about. Some of us knew that there was something going on. And, if you've never met up with a bunch of federal agents telling you what to do, they said, lock that door, and lock that door, and lock that door, and nobody can get in unless you ask us. And Torrey was trying to say, and they said, be back here in the morning at such and such a time, lock the employees out. And I thought, I can't do that. I'll have to call them and tell them, because they didn't want any of the employees in there. And some of them I couldn't get, and they showed up. I said, I'm so sorry. And we started going through his files, and he had signed a bunch of orders right before he went out there, and you just won't believe. And it was just every day. I had to lock my office downstairs because I had all these records in the closet, and all these people started calling about their trust, and it just was a nightmare. Every day. I got a call from an automobile agency, and he had ordered 3 new cars for his court officers because they served process. And we found...
But all those questions came to you because you were presiding judge. So.
We found file after file that had been stuck back, DUIs that he allegedly had under advisement, outlandish fees, and if it hadn't been by Judge Brandt, Chancellor Brandt, Chancellor Lyle, and Judge Kurtz, and one lawyer, I couldn't have done it because it was just insurmountable. It was something every day. And the feds were in the jury room upstairs, locked up. And they'd call me and say, tell Mr. Rooker that we want 500 tickets today, and these are the numbers. And they were always registration and sticker, because that was a racket going too. That a court officer would pick them up from the dealership and go get the registration and sticker and take them back, and they would charge him.
How long did you have to deal with the regular duties of presiding judge, but also had to deal with the investigations.
Oh, over a year. And then right at the end of my term, they wanted me to finish that out. And I would. The other thing that happened during that same time is Ann Lacey got in all of her troubles and left. And
Criminal court judge Ann Lacey Johns resigned.
and I'm handling all I can handle. And one of the Supreme Court justices calls me and says that, first of all, she carried some equipment and it was down in where she was living. I don't need to go into all that, but I said, Judge, I'm going to tell you something. You are the Chief Justice, and I'm doing all I can do. I don't have any help like you do to send down there looking for all of this. I don't have time, to find those files. She has those files. And I certainly don't have time to write an opinion on a hearing that I didn't hear. And I said, I can't do any more than I'm doing. And if you can, you come on down here because I have the feds in the grand jury room. I have everything going on. And if it hadn't been for little Harbison, I couldn't have done it. Because he tried 2 complex will trials. That I only had so many hands.
Is this Bill Harbison
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. It was just... And the other 3 judges, I couldn't... Judge Chancellor Lyle took all the health care where there was this racket going on of overpaying. And Chancellor Brandt took about 4 that there were questions about the attorney's fees and the management of the trust. And then Judge Kurtz would just take anything. And, I had a regular docket, including, and I got no extra help. That's what I didn't understand. The Supreme Court didn't send anybody down. But you can imagine my surprise when an automobile agency calls up and says, you can come pick up your cars. And I said, what cars? And everywhere I turned, there was money spent that nobody knew had been spent. And, it just,
Well, let me turn the tables a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about your philosophy about your law clerks and your staff and the clerks that you hire, how you keep up with them. I've read some tributes from the law clerks that were given to you in the LIW Matters, and just absolutely beautiful.
They're wonderful.
They've left your office and done so well.
And they've made me look so good.
Just talk a little bit about the philosophy of what you do.
Well, we call them the junior judges, okay? And I interview a bunch before I hire somebody, and I tell them, this is almost like a marriage. We have to work together every day, and you have to be able to read my mind and think like I think. And if you have a problem with that, I understand that, because that's not like any other job. But I said, I can tell you this. If you do a good job, I'll help you get a job. But you don't need to come to work for me if you have a problem working for a woman. If you're anal about some things and not others. I said, if it's a day that everybody has to clean commodes, then you have to clean commodes because I clean commodes. And I don't ask you to do anything I won't do myself. And I remember them all on their birthday now. We have a luncheon twice a year. And at Christmas, I still give them each an ornament for their tree. And, I couldn't have made it. They made me look so good. Oh, they really were the brain power.
Let me read one of the comments. Every person she was interviewing was qualified for the job. Okay, here we go. I always remember, my job interview with Judge Haynes. When I left, I just knew that I was not getting the job. She did not ask me anything I thought to be important during the interview. Instead, we talked about our families, hometowns, and the UT Falls. At the time, I did not understand her method. However, now that I know Judge Haynes, I realized what she was doing. Every person she was interviewing was qualified for the job. Judge Haynes did not care about my achievements in law school. She cared about who I was, where I had come from, and the kind of person I wanted to be. It is her belief in the power of relationships.
It is. And, it's like me saying to you, Miss Mim, I enjoyed reading your brief. I don't expect you to get up and dissertate on it again because I've read it. I'd read everything they'd submitted in their resumes, and I had narrowed it to them. I had reread their resume and their writing sample. I knew all that. I want to know what they were like as human beings. Could they fit in the network that we had? Could they understand how hard it would be? Like one of the male judges said, do you realize that all your employees are women? And I said, do you realize that you have 9 and I have 4 and all of yours are women except the secretary? But I wanted 2 things. I wanted someone that could work in that environment, and I wanted somebody that I would be proud to recommend. And I cannot tell you how many times I'd come off the bench and shut that door and look at my law clerk and say, don't you ever make a stupid mistake. Now let's talk about what you just viewed. And so I viewed it as a learning. I cannot teach them to write. If they went through 3 years of law school and they can't write a decent brief, I don't have time to teach them to write well.
So the law clerk said it's her belief in the power of relationships, and you do a lot in that area. You send gifts, you send notes, you have the world's best Christmas card. Talk about what you do on a daily basis to keep connected with people.
I don't know. I like people. I don't like people that play games. So I have a trash mail list, and about 70 packages of trash mail go out a week. And there are people that have had cancer like I did, or there are people that are having financial problems or mental problems or just need lifting up. And I said thoughts and jokes and write them notes. And I'll tell you a funny story about my friend Pat Summit. She was on my list going through her divorce, and I was a quasi behind-the-scene lawyer for her. Okay. And finally one day I'd put her on the trash mail and I'd write her notes and she'd call. And we finally one day she called and I said, pay him and get it over. You're wearing yourself out. So she did. So the next week or 2, I send the mailings, and after the divorce is final, I write her a note saying, you don't need these anymore, so this is your last. P.S. You never paid any postage anyhow. By return personal delivery mail, I get a $50 check. Well, I stand there, and I should have copied it and framed it. But I mail it back to her and say, you're back on it. And she writes back, don't ever take me off. So recently, about 8 or 10, I don't know, it's been longer than that, I guess in the fall, before basketball started, I get this huge box from UT. And I think it's something from the Alumni Association, or I was a torchbearer and they're always, I'm trying to help them do this and that. And, you sort of don't, not take it for granted, but, I couldn't imagine anybody sending me. And she sent me 2 of the new basketball shirts that the girls were going to be wearing, the 2 different ones. And I just cried and cried. So when I wrote her a note that week, I said, the basketball shirts paid your postage for the next year. But I think that that's one of the things that I view that's wrong with modern technology is person-to-person contact. And I believe in it. It's like we've got some boys that work up at the farm that just need a little lift up. There are all kinds of things that you can do. That Children's Hospital was, it fed my soul. From the start to the finish, it fed my soul. I was, and we built that building while I was president and moved into it. And I can't tell you, we had 3 trial runs to move the Neo and everybody into the new. First 3 were just god-awful. And, of course, Monroe Carroll was there. He's my friend. He was. And this is the final one, okay? We say we've got it down pat, okay? So we get out there at 4 o'clock in the morning and we start moving patients, okay? And it's going just... And then the police call and they say, look outside. And all these ambulances are circling. Everybody wants to be the first patient in the new hospital. Well, we have run out of money, and we're going to have to raise some more just to build a helicopter pad. And we get this emergency phone call that there is a baby in a helicopter on top of the old Vanderbilt Hospital. And by the time they get him over to us in our new neonatal, he is as black as that shoe. And, you know, we're all standing there just... And anyhow, a miracle happened that day. But that afternoon, he's crying. He's pink. And we're all standing there crying because, you know, yes, we have this hospital. And nobody said, they said we couldn't do it. We couldn't raise the money. We couldn't build it. And it just touched my heart. And it still does. I mean, it's just, it's something that I truly am proud of. And I feel like Nashville needed it. Monroe Carroll believed, doctors believed, and it just took a lot of organization and putting it all together. And it is, you know, if I don't do another thing for the rest of my life, it fed my soul, my heart. I'll tell you, one day I was running late for a big meeting, and you know, you see things and you think, isn't this wonderful that I got to see it? And I start off the elevator, and these two kids are in wheelchairs with chemo, IV, and they're racing. And I back up, and I watch them, and all of a sudden I step back out, and here's this child on a tricycle trying to catch them, and he too is getting chemo. And you know they're getting the very best treatment in the world.
And still getting to do what they love to do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I was just incidental to it all. Just I stood there and cried, and I walked in, and Jim said, "What on earth?" And I said, "Another miracle just rolled by." And it was. I mean, you know.
Are you still involved with
I am. I got an invitation today. I wouldn't want to be chair again, but I want to stay involved in helping do things. I think that's where I'm going to do some volunteer work, reading and stuff. I don't know. I promised myself I wouldn't do anything until I decide and whether I'm going to mediate some cases or not. And I've had, you know, I'm involved in a huge project. I'm watching my 401k go in a bunch of logs. I mean, it's really expensive to do an old house.
Talk about that. What are you doing?
Oh, it's so funny. Every time we've done a major project, whether it's addition to this house, building the law office, whatever, Joe gets involved, and then he turns it all over to me. And so when we started talking about some boys had vandalized the old house, redoing it, I said, this can't be the case. This has to be us involved, and you have to be an equal partner, or I'm not going to do it. There's so many things I want to do to it, but not without, you know.
Well, talk about what it is.
Well, it's a house that part of it was built in 1837, part of it in 1880-something, and the rest in 1901. And it has 4 log rooms, and then the addition, and the dog trot, and a smokehouse, and a slave's quarters where they cooked, and a buggy house where the old buggy was, and the most wonderful spring house. And I've built a rock garden around the spring house and put cannas in there, and it's the sweetest little building you've ever seen. But we have finished, we are going to expose just a small portion of the logs on the outside. And then on the inside, there really weren't 4 rooms. There were 12-foot log walls, and the first 8 feet, they were all short people. It was living space, and the top 4 was their sleeping area. And I found in one of the logs a tin, spoon, knife, and fork that they'd hand done, and notes, and just so many things that when you tear it out, so the logs will be exposed inside, but not outside. But one of the amazing things, and this couldn't happen today, when we started, we had this historical architect and measured the support beam. Now keep in mind it's hand-hewed, and it's off 1/4 of an inch from one end to the other. Now that's not even true in this house or anybody else's house. It's amazing. When we tore the kitchen floor out because it was rotten, there are 2 logs running this way, and they'd hand-hewed out places and laid the other logs across to support the floor. So they figured everything out. The original logs are still in the smokehouse where Joe's great-grandfather smoked hams.
What a project.
Oh, it is. It is, and it's fun. We got where we can't wait to go up there to see what progress has been made, we make a list because there's so many things you have to decide. Like we're going to move this old wood cooking stove back. So we have to measure everything because of this old fireplace. So that's one of my projects going on now.
Judge Haynes, let's turn to women in power in Nashville. We've discussed that you were the first woman to win a countywide race against the incumbent in 1982. You were involved with Congressman Donner's congressional race. You were involved with Judge Walter Kurtz's race, the public defender in 1972. When you decided to run in 1982, can you just give us a little bit of what the landscape was like for women at that?
Oh, you know how naive you can be. I never will forget, I had just been to D.C., and it was on a bill for the truck drivers and for the AFL-CIO. I had drafted it, now keep in mind, and it was about parts. And I went up there and got it passed. And I went out to speak to them after I decided to run, and they told me they were going to endorse the male candidate. And that happened again and again. That, oh, Barbara, we appreciate all you're doing, but we just can't do that. And I think the thing that I see, I think there are 2 kinds of women that ascend. And there are those like me that think you have a duty to pull everybody else up behind you. And you and I have done that over the years. But we have helped some people that no longer will reach behind them and pull somebody else up. I think we have to set an example that we can be learned, do a good job, and still be a wife and a mother. I still bake sourdough bread every weekend. Mary Neely came out last weekend, and she and I made sourdough bread. But I also think that part of the problem today is that you can almost buy any position. And I am against the super PACs. I think we've gotten away from knocking on doors. The first time Joe ran for office, we knocked on every door in Goodlettsville. Now, he didn't win. He lost by 100 votes against an incumbent. But we made lots and lots of friends. And I think people want to touch you. And I see some of these people, and particularly women, that really, I go to some of those seminars that how to run, and you get up and tell them, I get up and tell them, and they don't listen. And we have so many people that are media hawks that sell you. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. When maybe you don't need to do any of the above. You might just need to shake on 10,000 hands. And you need to know the job you're running for. You know, I am amazed at some of the people that are running now that they can't even answer questions on the budget. Dear Lord, on Afghanistan, on the Supreme Court. And so I think that even though we worked really hard early on, and you and I both took some abuse from some judges, I can remember one judge that would always say, "Good morning, gentlemen, and you too, Mrs. Haynes." And I thought, oh. But I think that I'm proud of my daughter and your daughter. They're living in a world that's better because we fought those battles. Some of the women are not willing to fight those battles anymore. And I think it's important that it's not important whether I can make coleslaw or not. I can buy coleslaw. I can buy cookies. Now, I like to do those things. But it is important that as more than 50% of the voters in this world, that our voices are heard about our bodies, about education, about safety. Oh, there are a million things that women need to exercise their voices.
Well, let me go to where we are now, 30 years after you won your race in 1982. And talk about, I want you to kind of reflect on where we are as women office holders. We haven't had a woman mayor in Nashville, nowhere near a woman governor, but we have 3 women on the Supreme Court. So, kind of where do you think we are? The women, the trial judges, women seem to do pretty well. When they run for trial judges now versus what you faced 30 years ago. Just reflect, if you would, the numbers in the legislature, you're very aware of how that is. Kind of give us your thoughts about where women are as office holders in Tennessee.
Well, it's not just Tennessee. You look at the U.S. Senate, you look at the U.S. House, go down and look at the General Assembly, and you will see that it's still a good old boy network. And it's very hard to penetrate it. And it shouldn't, because, there's some idiots up there. My Lord, my dog would serve better than some of those people in their brains. But women, 1, are afraid. 2, raising money is a problem. 3, is getting enough people that will help you. I had more volunteers. People gave up a pair of shoes to give me money. And I worked really, really hard. And I think that professional people have convinced people that you don't have to go to yard sales, and you don't have to knock on doors, and you don't have to touch those people. It's this morning. I go in to buy fruit, and this man said, I was in your court once, and I really appreciate you being nice to me. It makes life worthwhile that he thought he got a fair shake, and I was nice to him. I think the judges have done a great job representing women. But I think it's very, very difficult to say to someone, I want you to run for state senate. Because they look at it as so massive that they can't do it. And it really is pretty simplistic. I mean, there's not a whole lot to being in the legislature. Duh. It's just like, I think it's time we said to women, if you are, or if you want something to change, you just can't sit home and gripe about it. You have to do something about it. You have to be involved. And, I know it's not easy. I hate it when I have to call somebody and say, let me tell you something. This is how I feel. Right now I'm on a tear about our swimming pool back. Not mine. We teach hundreds of kids every year. Pleasant Green closed the 1st of August because the director, who's new, didn't know what she's doing. But there are little bitty things that you can change. I pray every night that my grandchildren will believe that one person can change the world. And that's what you have to believe. You have to believe that one person can make a change that benefits everybody.
You sure have to change.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've sure had a good time, and I have learned more than I have. Oh, have I learned some important lessons.
Well, tell me a little bit about your children, because they are so important to your children. And what is it that you want from them?
They're so funny because in high school, people would say something to them. They say, "Oh, she's just a mom," and that's how I wanted it to be. I didn't want them to feel compelled. I'm very proud of them. They're all they have a job today. None of them moved back home, and none of them are in jail. But they have. They each have a good life that's vastly different for each one of them. I'm proud of my grandchildren. They're wonderful. But I think the most amazing thing is that we can still all get together. It's like they are so excited over renovating the old house. And the grandchildren are so excited about it. And we can still get together and ski and cook out and laugh and have fun. And I think that I called each one of them in when they went away to college. And the first one, I said, now I want to tell you something. Jeff. I said, Jeffrey, I want to tell you something. I'm going to quit being a mother today, and the only strings I have to use is the paycheck. But I would like to be your friend. But in all relationships, you have to work at friendship. So by the time Scotty got ready to leave, Jeff says to Scotty, Scotty's the middle child, Mom's going to give you this strange lecture. Just don't pay any attention to it. So I sit down and I go through the same thing with Scotty, and he said, you know, Jeff's right. That is strange. So by the time Mandy's getting ready to leave, they both go to her and say, Mom's going to give you this lecture about being a friend and how you have to work at friendships. And she's no longer going to be a mom. Just don't pay any attention to it. So when I get to Mandy said, Mother, I've heard it 3 times already. I don't want to hear it again. And I said, you're going to hear it. But I think you have to work at relationships. And I have the best son-in-law and daughter-in-law you will not believe. And I prayed and I promised myself I would work at being the best mother-in-law possible. Because I want a relationship with them. And I know sometimes they think I'm a little bit strange. And I think sometimes it's not easy to have 2 elected parents. You know, last night Jeff came out for a meeting in Goodlettsville. He's giving the industrial board some advice, and he took us to dinner. And there's never a time that somebody. Last night it was a guy that I loved, huge, 6'6", African American. He was the vice squad officer, and then he went over to be a federal officer. And I bet I signed no telling how many search warrants. And his wife told him not to come over and interrupt us, but he came over and hugged me. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. And Jeff said, it's always the same, and it is. Now, that will cease, you know, as I've been off the bench a while, and Joe's been off the bench, out of the Senate. But I think your children have to realize that they're sharing you. And yet, they're the ones that will come and say, Mama, would you add so-and-so to your trash mail list? Mama, would you help so-and-so? Mama, we need to raise some money for Martha O'Brien. I mean, you know. So it's next to loving Joe, I've loved parenting better than anything.
And would you just name each of your grandchildren, just in case?
Well, there is Campbell. Now, Campbell is my debater. He was on the moot court team. He went to Dartmouth to summer camp, and he taught debate 2 summers at Dartmouth. And he stayed up there this summer to teach. Benjamin and Furman are my twins, and they are just as different as daylight and dark, and they will be seniors at Montgomeryville. Haynes turned 16 Monday, so we had a family dinner for him Tuesday night. Adam is just turned 15, and he is in the 9th grade at MBA. Carrie is just turned 14. We have a bunch of birthdays, right? Excuse me. It's those long winters. And those babies come. Carrie is 14, and she'll be in the 8th grade at Harpeth Hall. And Mary Neely is the baby, and she's just spent some time out here because her brother started back to school, and she is a hoot. I mean, you can tell she's the baby. She says this. We're riding down the road, and we're talking about all these books and stuff. And she said, you know why I like you? And I said, no. She said, because we're both geniuses.
Judge Haynes, you've been practicing law and been a judge since 1976. Kind of give us your thoughts about the legal profession today. What's the state?
I think that, and you're seeing firms change right now because they have gotten away from civility. They've gotten away from humility. I think that some of the lawyers that think they're hot shot, I could put them down in a minute in open court, and I just don't do it because recently I told a young lawyer last year, and I was trying to help him win his case, and I said, Mr. So-and-so, the court would really like to hear about the case of so-and-so, so-and-so. Instead of saying, I haven't read it, but I'll be glad to brief you, which you would have quickly said, he said, I don't want to talk about that. And I thought, that's the case on point, and you don't want to talk about it? Okay. But I think it has changed, and I think we've lost some camaraderie that was important. I can remember that some of us used to go over to the Common Club, Capitol Club then, and it took years before women could go over there and have a drink after work. I can remember the first time I went to the bar picnic, and I had taken my own deck of cards. And I am a good card player. I love playing bridge, played Masters Bridge, love playing poker. And two lawyers that you would know well, I said, are you really going to play poker? And I said, I most surely am. You said, Well, when we got ready to leave, I had won. And they said, you can't leave. You've won all the money. But I left the deck of cards. And I think that we have gotten away from that. And I think that women should realize, and I've tried every woman that's ever come to talk to me, I've said it's not easy being a wife, a mother, and a lawyer. And you have to prioritize it. And I said, there are times, one time I was livid. But I didn't lose my cool. I was in front of Judge Swigert. And you know how he was. And Joe got tied up in some other county and couldn't pick up the carpool at MBA. And I said, Judge Swigert, could we take a break just a minute and let us approach the bench? She said, sure. And I said, would you mind taking a 30-minute break? I said, I've run into carpool trouble. All I have to do is go get them. They can sit out in the hall and study, and it won't take me 30 minutes. And he said, we most assuredly cannot. And I thought, that's such a little thing. I don't ask for favors. I never ask him for a favor. And so I had to call Joe's secretary and say, lock the office. You're going to have to do this. He won't let me leave. But those kind of simple courtesies mean all the world when a woman is practicing law. And I tell them all, the first thing you do is hire a good nanny that comes to your house and make them clean your, you don't want a nanny. You want somebody that's going to do everything and help you. And the second thing is a lawyer told me today that another lawyer called her sweetie in court. And so it's a changing world out there, and I think that there are bunches of heroes. Sandra Day was a hero. Ruth Bader's a hero. Certainly Hillary was a hero. And we all have to look at them and not be envious, but say, they're making a real contribution to the world. And that's what we're here for, is to make the world a better place.
Final question for you, because you've had such an extraordinary career, and Judge, you really have made the world a better place yourself. What legacy do you hope you left behind?
I hope that my children, my grandchildren, my friends, and all the litigants would say that I prayed every morning on the bench that I would be learned, fair, patient, and tolerant. And I hope that that's what they say about me. That's what I want. You couldn't ask for any more than that.